Morning all. Thank you for having me, and thank you to Nuffield, firstly, for giving me the opportunity to travel over the last what should have been 2, but 3 years, and to my sponsors, the Yorkshire Agricultural Society, I know Ben is representing in the room today, and the National Trust. Thank you very much. Right, I'll get stuck in. When I started studying this topic in 2019, regenerative agriculture was a fringe movement. I know some of you in the room will object to that, but broadly speaking, it was not in the mainstream. I was then 3 years later making my daughter some breakfast, and on the side of the cereal packet it said regenerative agriculture. And in that period of time, we've seen corporates with a combined turnover of more than 1.4 trillion US dollars make public commitments to sourcing from regenerative farms. Now, I'm here to tell you that a pylon of this size should make every single one of us in this room sit up. So why are they doing it? Well, broadly, it's for 3 reasons. The first is that they are worried about the impact that climate shocks will have on their ability to reliably procure ingredients, which makes sense. If you have a big drought, you have a big yield impact on oats, for example, then making cereal bars is a lot more expensive. And consider that in the next 40 years, we've got to produce as much food as we have in the last 1,000 years in a changing climate. The second reason is, as we've already heard, corporates are interested in getting a handle on their Scope 3 emissions. So these are carbon emissions attributable to the suppliers in their supply chain, farmers. And consider that for a pint of beer, roughly 30 to 40% of the carbon footprint of that beer is sourced back to the field of barley. And thirdly, it's to do with all of that ESG that we hear about, environmental, social, governance, agendas of corporates, some of which are related to brand platforms. Now, corporates are not particularly used to working right down at farm level at the scale that they have committed to. They're more often working at the top of the value chain with aggregators, ingredients companies, mills, abattoirs, tanneries, but not really in the reeds with farmers. And as we know, regenerative agriculture is unique to each farm. It is a unique challenge. The same principles apply. How do I mimic nature? The same outcomes are strived for. How do I sequester more carbon, improve biodiversity, improve water quality? But the tools that each farm uses are uniquely different. I stood on a farm in Western Australia where to grow a cover crop in 150 mil of rain a year, organic matter levels of 0.25%, they've got to inject worm juice down with their drills, with their seed drill. On the other side of the country, on Eastern Australia, they can grow a cover crop over the top of my head in 8 weeks. So broadly speaking, corporates are taking the same approach. Sure, it's a bit different in each case, but broadly speaking, it's the same approach. And it's what is known as, or what I call, a pilot and project approach, and that probably resonates. And it goes roughly like this. Convene a group of farms, nominate a trial host farmer, set the objectives of what it is you're going to trial, invite other farmers, measure, share learnings, hope the other farmers adopt it, maybe pay for some cover crop seed. The sessions take a similar approach. This is what this farmer has achieved. This is how they've achieved it. And maybe after you've had a bacon bap for your lunch, this is why they've done it. Now, this will be familiar to anyone in the room that has been involved in variety trials or other farm trials. It is treating it like a technical challenge. And I've seen this pattern repeated. And perhaps that's not surprising, because we are, after all, at the very beginning of this journey. We are, as what Simon Lucas describes in his book, Changing the Food Game, phase 1 of a 4-phase journey in sustainable market transformation. And I'm going to quote from his book, because he's much more eloquent than I am. Companies take symbolic action and initiate projects. So see if this resonates with you. Companies take symbolic action and initiate projects, partly because it's the easiest thing to do, and partly because they don't know what else to do. And it works for a while. Money starts flowing, compelling pictures and stories start appearing, joint projects are launched, a project industry is born. A few years later, there are many fragmented foundations and projects, each with its own focus and methodology, each claiming success and impact. However, the problem is not solved, just covered up. And he's right. Solving technical problems and running projects and trials is not changing farmer behavior on the ground. I challenged the Canadian CEO of a multinational about how farmer-centric their program was. The response I got was, absolutely. And I got a list of all the reasons why it was farmer-centric. I asked one of their farmers, who himself was hosting the trial site, how farmer-centric is their program? The answer was 3 out of 10. I asked the farmer involved in trials in the UK, how likely is it that the corporate you're working with is going to meet their commitment to source 100% of their ingredients from regenerative farms? Response, not likely. I was in a cotton farm in Central Valley in the US, in California, where there was a group of brands working with a farmer to produce regenerative cotton. The farmer said, sure, I grow cotton, I'm up for a challenge. Use this bit of land. Thank you very much, Mr. Farmer. Now step aside, let's bring the experts in. Along came the academics, got their noses in books, designed the perfect cover crop seed, designed perfectly for this soil type. Cover crop grew like billiard, poof, massive cover crop. Took 3 doses of herbicide to kill, a blanket of green manure on the soil, and they couldn't grow a crop of cotton the next year. The farmer is now running that project. Now, if this approach isn't working for trials involving 5 farmers or 40 farmers, then how is it meant to scale up? There are 2.2 million farms in the US and the UK. Add in Latin America, the EU, Australia, and you're closer to 18 million farms. The trials from the corporates that I've spoken to in the last 4 months alone need to scale between 20 and 220 times in the next 8 years to meet their commitments. Sustainable Markets Initiative released a warning shot a few weeks ago, saying that the rate of adoption needs to triple to be applied to 1.5 billion acres, 1/3 of the world's cropland, if regenerative agriculture is to play its part in limiting warming to 1.5 degrees. Now consider that the innovation cycle of a farm is roughly annual. If I plant a cover crop, and I know I'm using that a lot as an example, if I plant a cover crop and it fails, I can't really go and plant it next week or tomorrow, like I do in the tech industry if I'm innovating there. I've got to wait 12 months. So we've really only got 7 bites at the apple here. Corporates need to realize that they're not solving a technical problem. That's the easy part. What they're doing is solving a people problem. To paraphrase the words of Guy Speth, US advisor on climate change, I thought we could solve climate change by 30 years of good science. I was wrong. This is a human challenge. So why is it a human challenge? Well, it's because changing farm systems on the ground is really hard. Regenerative agriculture is not just planting a cover crop. It's not just direct drilling. It's not just rotational grazing. It can't be reduced to simple interventions. And even if it could be reduced to simple interventions, nature plays its hand. It doesn't rain for 3 months. It does rain for 3 months. So the plan goes out of the window. And always in the back of my mind, I'm asking, well, why am I doing this anyway? Why would I keep trying when it's so hard, when I don't make any money, when I'm already working 70-hour weeks? However, if corporates can solve the engagement problem, if farmers come to believe that a regenerative system is better for their farm, if they see their farm differently, then everything changes. As one Canadian rancher says, to make small changes, change the way you do things. To make big changes, change the way you see things. Both corporates and farmers pulling in the same direction. To use the overused phrase, incentives align. And I've seen recognition of this. In the words of one corporate, within our trials, some farmers are already doing all this stuff. If everyone were like them, then they wouldn't need me. But to do this, to solve the engagement problem and to drive lasting change, corporates need a new farmer-centric framework. Yes, trials play an important part, but they're not the whole picture. At Grassroots Farming, we adopt Simon Sinek's philosophy of behavior change. Let me give you an example. 2 different scenarios, both with the same outcome, but one approach from the top down and one approach from the bottom up. Farmer A, told that soil health is important, banned from using ivermectins, intestinal wormers, told that they can't use ivermectins, so therefore don't use ivermectins. Outcome, don't use ivermectins. Scenario B, farmer told to go and measure dung beetles, told to benchmark them, compare their populations to other farms, then told about the important role that dung beetles play in improving soil health, which translates to better forage growth through the summer, which improves farm profitability. Farmer then told, using ivermectins kills dung beetles. Outcome? Fewer ivermectins used on that farm, but a very, very different process. So we are doing 3 things, and the first is about changing the mindset of the farmer, and we have this mantra, on my farm, show me why. So this involves a farmer going out and benchmarking the regenerative indicators on their farm. And it is important that they do it themselves. It's not taking a soil sample and sending it off to a lab. It's digging a hole with a spade in your smartphone, counting worms, learning about juvenile worms versus adult worms, learning about the different types of worms. The second is we then say, how can you improve these? What support can we give you? Your farm is unique. You know your farm better than anyone else. How can you improve these? And that results in a regenerative farm plan built by the farmer. And the third step is we say, and what can we do to help you deliver that plan? And in our case, it is paying more for what we buy from them. Taking a truly farmer-centric approach turns the pile-on of corporate interest, which I think is a really good thing, into something valuable on farm. It lets farmers determine the best approach to adopting a regenerative system on their patch of land, and it channels investment into what matters for them. So where do we go from here? Well, I've been convening a group of corporates that I've been working with over the last 3 years and talking to them about how we can build this framework into their programs, to work alongside their trials with their farmers to build a tool that can be deployed cost-effectively and help them to get from 20 to 2,000 farmers. Now, critically, this is a group of corporates that sits in different industry verticals: fashion, cereals, beverage, red meat. And that is because farmers don't rear beef, and farmers don't rear leather. Farmers rear heifers and bullocks. And if the person that is wanting to work with regenerative farms buys leather, wants a different system than the person that buys beef, then the farmer is pulled in two directions. This is farmer-centric. Now, what I haven't done is talk about the other mechanisms. I haven't talked about insurance. I haven't talked about the role of carbon markets, data ownership and incentivization, risk sharing. But given the scale and the urgency of the commitments that have been made and the urgency to shore up our ability to produce food through a changing climate, I'm convinced, and my Nuffield has shown me consistently on almond farms, beef farms, sheep farms, cereal farms, beef farms, banana farms, cotton farms, potato farms, that this can only happen. Change on a systemic level can only happen if it happens from the bottom up, driven by farmers, empowered and supported by industry. Never before have we needed farmers more than we need them today. Thank you very much.